Okay, so chapter 34 is going to be a very brief discussion on 457 plans. The primary reason that this is going to be a brief and abridged discussion is that we've covered a lot of the basics of this prior to this discussion. Additionally, these, for a lot of intents and purposes, especially for participants, behave very similar to your other 4 series or 400 series retirement accounts, like a 401k and or a 403b plan. Okay, so what we're looking at here with code section 457. So this would be either 457B or less commonly a 457F, and the designation between those two is in the granular details that we'll get to later. The gist of these types of plans is that they're for really non-federal tax paying organizations. Couple of things like churches and synagogues, any type of religious affiliated groups are not really included as much in this. So some examples I've given you here: public universities, the one we're attending now, or you guys are attending now, offers a 457B plan along with a 403B plan, and any other state or local governmental agencies. Okay. Now, so when these would be utilized, again, this is just kind of a quick little rehash. Any municipal entity that is, tax exempt for the most part, school districts, so to speak, public schools, sanitation department for a city, Muncie would be an example of that. They could offer one if employer is exempt from federal income tax. Again, just to reiterate, excludes religious organizations here. Okay. All right, so limits. Let's talk limits and contributions. So the limit is the same as a 401k plan, so that's 19,500. Or, so something new here, it's the max of that or participants' compensation up to a certain amount. So I've got a quick example here. Let's say that we have Max, who works for a public university. They offer a 457B and 403B plan. The max he can contribute up to is the 19.5 for both plans. So that's one thing that's pretty peculiar, or it's really a great thing about any institution that offers a 403B and 457B. That limit, that 19,500 for 2020, is for each account individually. So they could save up to the example here, $39,000. So an employee at Ball State, if they want to do that, could opt for that, right? So if they can just forget about roughly $40,000 a year, then they have an option to save. And again, these are tax advantage accounts for the most part, and we'll discuss that later on. You also have catch-up contributions. There's nothing really too different here compared to the 401k and 403b plans. The example is that participants, anyone over 50, can do an additional 6,000. Okay. Now, the distribution requirements are a little more generous here as well. You can withdraw, you can withdraw before retirement age if you sever, so if you're no longer employed with that institution, or if you have an unforeseeable emergency. So these would be treated as basic income. Okay, so there's no penalty for that. However, distributions must begin at age 70.5. So you can't keep holding and letting it gain tax free after the age of 75. You must withdraw some post that. Okay. Now, eligibility, again, there's no specific coverage, and these plans can vary, but mostly ERISA rules still apply. So that's mostly due to non-discriminatory acts. So you can't, example here, you can't offer a higher percentage match to your managers or you probably wouldn't have salesmen in a public university, but you can't offer more based on the level that they're working. So they can't be discriminatory in that way, with very, very few exceptions. Okay. Funding. Now, if it's a non-government employer, these plans may not be funded. Okay. But traditionally, the financing options offered are related to risk management insurance services, so annuities and or life insurance. If it's a governmental institution that's offering this, so public university might be an example, they must fund their plan. Okay, so they have to be funded. Now, as far as tax implications, really the only thing different here is that, well, the organization is not really getting as much of an advantage or any advantage from it at all because they already don't really pay federal income taxes. So there's no way to kind of circumvent something that you don't experience from the get-go. Now, for those who are participating and contributing to their plans, they see the same kind of pre-tax advantages. There are some 457 and 403Bs that offer Roth advantages as well. This is interesting because if we compare it to, let's say, a Roth IRA, there are limitations to that. The first limitation that you can only put in $6,000 max into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA each year. Whereas if you have a 457B Roth, you can put up to $19,500 after tax. Another thing to keep in mind is that Roth IRAs have those income limitations. So beginning at $125,000 per person, so this is individual income, up to $139,000, you're able to, or you're not able to contribute the $6,000. It keeps dropping, and then after $139,000, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA at all unless you do a backdoor Roth. Okay, whereas you wouldn't have to worry about that with a Roth 401k, 403b, or for 457b. There are no income limitations, and the upper limit on how much you can contribute is again whatever set by the IRS. And for 2020, that is $19,500. Now, so what is an unforeseeable emergency? So I want to end on this because I said you can withdraw for three reasons: retirement, severance, and or an unforeseeable emergency. So the coding, or excuse me, the way this is codified in the law is not quite as direct as some would like. So the current regulations just say severe financial hardship. A couple of examples that are traditionally supported: sudden and or unexpected illness, loss of property, accidental death is definitely one that can be covered too if it's of a beneficiary or dependent. Some examples that would not be covered: purchase of a new residence or college education for your children. So this doesn't fall into the unforeseeable emergency kind of thing. Okay. All right, so that's it for 457 plans, at least for this point in time. The real reason that I think it's good for us to kind of get a handle on these, is because they are similar to 401k plans, but they're only offered by government organizations or those organizations that are not taxed at the federal level. For the most part, they behave in a very similar way. So when you're thinking about the final project where we look at a couple of plans, one being a 457 plan, then you have this to kind of go back on. But for most intents and purposes, for those who are participating, there are not huge differences for the 401k and 457b plans. Really, the main one is that you're able to withdraw upon severance, and you don't have to wait till 59 and a half or your retirement age. You can withdraw at that point. Okay, now other changes are just going to be due to stipulations that the entity offering it, so the employer offering it. So it could be that they don't allow hardship withdrawals, but that's not because it's a 457 plan. Okay, so any other differences or discrepancies is going to be due chiefly to the kind of verbiage or nomenclature that's set up by the employer offering the 457B or the 457F.